When someone you loved replaces you quickly, the first wound is usually humiliation, not just grief, humiliation. You look at the timeline and think, was I that easy to discard? Apparently so. Did I matter at all? How could someone claim love and then step into a new relationship as if nothing happened? People try to answer this psychologically. They'll tell you that the narcissist lacks empathy, that the narcissist cannot regulate their own emotions. They say narcissists fear abandonment. They say narcissists cannot tolerate shame. And all of those explanations are true, but they're incomplete, because if you've ever been close to someone with strong narcissistic traits, you know the experience isn't just psychological. It's energetic. I'm Kat Grace. I discuss trauma, spirituality, and CPTSD. Let's get started. Energetically, the relationship feels extractive. You leave interactions feeling drained, disoriented, or strangely responsible for things you didn't do. And when the relationship ends, something even stranger happens. They replace you quickly, sometimes immediately, sometimes before you can even get out the door. And that moment cuts deeper than almost anything else. You may have invested years in someone, and you're packing your stuff to leave, and they already have a profile on a dating app. So let's talk about why this happens, not just psychologically, but also energetically. Because once you understand the structure underneath this behavior, the humiliation dissolves and something else replaces it. Clarity. First, we need to understand something fundamental. Healthy identity develops internally. Over time, most people build a stable sense of self through reflection, relationships, mistakes, repair, and emotional growth. Their identity becomes self-generated. They can be alone without collapsing. They can experience loss without needing immediate replacement, because their sense of self is not dependent on constant external reflection. But narcissistic identity, it forms a bit differently. It is not internally stabilized. It is externally regulated. In other words, the narcissistic self does not fully exist on its own. It requires mirrors, attention, admiration, validation, emotional reactions, even conflict. All of these interactions serve the same purpose. They stabilize the narcissist's identity, or should I say, sense of identity. Without them, something destabilizing happens internally. Not necessarily conscious panic, but a subtle collapse. A deep feeling of emptiness, a sense of disappearing, a tremendous void within. Many people who have studied narcissism describe this as a fragile ego. But from an energetic perspective, it functions more like an identity that requires continuous external fuel. Think of it as an energetic economy. Attention becomes currency. Emotional reactions become fuel. And relationships become supply lines. When you were in the relationship, you were not only a partner, you were also a primary supply line. Your emotional presence regulated their identity. Your reactions confirmed their importance. Your attempts to repair the relationship reinforced their centrality. Even your pain could serve this inverted system, because pain is still attention. Now imagine what happens when that supply line suddenly disappears. The narcissistic identity structure suddenly loses one of its primary regulators, and the internal system begins to destabilize. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, but enough that the person feels an urgent need to restore equilibrium. That is where the rapid replacement enters the picture. The new partner is not necessarily chosen for depth or beauty or intelligence. They are chosen for a particular function. They restore the mirror. They provide new emotional reactions. They stabilize the identity structure. Again, from the outside, this looks like emotional indifference, but what you're actually witnessing is identity regulation. The narcissistic system is restoring its supply network, and it does so quickly because the alternative, sitting in internal emptiness, is profoundly uncomfortable for them. Most people, after a breakup, go through a period of emotional processing. It's just something that most adults do. They may experience grief, anger, regret. Then they move on to reflection and then integration. And that process can take months or it can take years. But narcissistic structures, they avoid this phase like the plague, because introspection threatens the identity system itself. If someone looks deeply enough at their own patterns, they may encounter shame, vulnerability, or responsibility. And those states destabilize the narcissistic self. So instead of reflection, the system moves toward replacement. Replacement prevents the introspection. The new relationship acts like psychological insulation for them. It protects the person from encountering their own internal landscape. But there is also something else happening, something energetic. In many healing traditions, human beings are understood as relational fields. We regulate each other's nervous systems. We influence each other's emotional states. Our presence affects the energetic atmosphere around us. When someone forms a bond with you, your nervous system and their nervous system become partially intertwined. That's part of why breakups are painful. You're not just losing a person. No, you're untangling an energetic and biological connection. Now, imagine a person who has spent years, often decades, outsourcing their identity regulation to others. Their nervous system becomes accustomed to constant external stabilization. So when a relationship ends, their internal environment feels highly unstable. Silence feels unfamiliar. Solitude feels threatening. And instead of metabolizing, that instability, they move quickly toward a new relational regulator. The new partner becomes a temporary stabilizer. This is why many narcissistic relationships follow a specific pattern: idealization, devaluation, then comes the discard, and then the replacement. And the replacement is often startlingly fast. But here's something important to understand. Rapid replacement is not evidence of emotional strength. Quite the opposite. It's evidence of emotional dependence. People who can sit with loss without immediately replacing it usually have stronger internal regulation. They can experience grief without collapsing. They can feel emptiness without needing to immediately fill it. Narcissistic systems cannot, under any circumstances, tolerate that space for very long. They just can't do it. So they replace quickly, so quickly. Not because the relationship meant nothing. It might have meant a little bit to them, but because the internal structure requires continuous supply. It's exhausting. Understanding this reframes the humiliation many survivors feel. You are not necessarily easily replaced. You were energetically significant, which is precisely why the system needed to restore supply immediately when you left. The speed of replacement is not a measure of your value. It's not. It is a measure of the system's dependence. And it's incredibly sad. So, this is where healing begins to shift perspective. Because the moment you stop interpreting their behavior as a verdict on your worth, the entire narrative changes. Again, stop interpreting their behavior as a verdict of your worth. Okay? So you start seeing the structure, you start recognizing the pattern, and most importantly, you begin reclaiming your own energy. When you exit a narcissistic relationship, your nervous system often goes through a period of recalibration. At first, it can feel like withdrawal. I won't lie to you. It does. Feels like withdrawal. But your body is adjusting to the absence of chaos, intensity, and emotional unpredictability. Many people interpret this phase as loneliness, but in reality, it's integration. It truly is. Your system is reorganizing around internal stability rather than external turbulence. And this process, it takes time. And during that time, it can feel as though the narcissist has moved on effortlessly while you are still rebuilding. I truly understand. But what's actually happening is very different. You are developing internal sovereignty, and they are restoring external supply. Those are two very different trajectories. One leads towards greater autonomy. The other requires constant reinforcement. Over time, people who do the deeper healing often notice something surprising. Their tolerance for distortion disappears completely. Their nervous system becomes less willing to participate in manipulative dynamics, and you'll clock it very fast, and you'll trust yourself. So your energy field will become much clearer this way, and the kinds of relationships that you attracted in the past will no longer be in your awareness. Because when your identity becomes internally regulated, you no longer serve as a stable supply source for people who depend on external validation. And that is one of the best and kind of quiet transformation that happen after deep, deep healing. You stop being compatible with certain systems, not through force, but through energetic mismatch. There's no longer a resonance there because you healed and they didn't. So if someone replaced you quickly after a narcissistic relationship ended, understand what you are actually witnessing. You are watching a supply system reorganize itself. That behavior reflects the structure of their identity, not the depth of your worth. And once you understand that, the narrative begins to shift. Not toward bitterness, not at all, but toward clarity. And when that reclamation is complete, something powerful happens. You stop asking why you were replaced. You start recognizing why you no longer even belong in that energetic economy. It loses all appeal. And that realization, it changes everything. I'm Kat Grace. Thank you for being here. I hope this helped. If it did, like, subscribe, join our growing community, and go ahead and share this with someone that needs it right now. Until the next video, take care.